present. Mr. Holloman is the exception, and he is excused. He will be joining us on the phone. So at this time, if I could have Ms. Michaelis lead us in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Ms. Michaelis. Our student rep is not with us this evening, so I want to acknowledge that we do gather today on traditional land of the Dena'ina people, both past and present, and it is with gratitude and with honor the land itself and the people who have cared for it throughout the generations. Thank you. We want to welcome you to our meeting and thank you for attending and supporting the work of the Anchorage School District and this board. The mission of the Anchorage School District is educating all students for success in life. The board thanks students, parents, teachers, staff, school business partners, and the entire community for your investment in our district with your time, your talent, and your tax dollars. If you are unable to physically present for the entire meeting, be present for the entire meeting, you may choose to turn in to the Anchorage School District YouTube channel to watch the live stream. Recordings of meetings are also available through the agenda and board docs. And at this time, I'm looking for approval of the agenda. Is there any dissension? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. At this time, we have our focus on staff and students.
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this portion of the board meeting called Focus on Staff and Students. And it was a deliberate effort by the board to set aside some time at their meeting to focus on who and what makes ASD great, and it's the people of ASD. So without further ado, the board president and I would like to welcome up Dave Mayo-Kiley and the Anchorage Cops for Community Group. Please come forward. All right. We're going to share a few words. You can probably tell which one's Dave, not in uniform. In 2016, Anchorage Cops for Community began providing gifts for students in ASD's Child in Transition program through their Angel Tree project. More than 70 students had their holiday wishes granted in 2019 through the organizational efforts of Anchorage Cops for Community and the generosity of Anchorage residents. The angel tree is placed in the lobby of the Anchorage Police Department with angel tags listing the specific wishes of CIT students. Community members take an angel, fill in the request, and return the unwrapped gifts to APD. Anchorage Cops for Community makes sure requests are filled, then wrap and distribute gifts to families. Over the years, many families have expressed their deep gratitude for Anchorage Cops for Community generosity. If not for these efforts, many wishes of those students would go unfilled. Thank you for your commitment and generosity to the students and our community. You make ASD great. Thank you so much. So, it's tradition, I don't know if he told you that, but when you're up here, we ask you some questions. And when you're a kid, we ask you what grade you're in and your age and things like that, what you like best. But you don't have to go that far. You can just simply share about the program. And Dave, you first, and then we can pass the mic.
Sure.
You want to say?
Yeah, so I'm Dave Mayo-Kiley with the Child in Transition program. And as Dr. Bishop said, it's been, I think, 4 years now that APD has helped us with this, and it's really been an amazing program. When we first started doing it, we were a little bit skeptical. We're like, are they really going to get these gifts for kids? And they did, and they kept coming back and saying, we need more angels. People are taking these angels. They're filling the gifts. We want to get them out to your families. They did a big display of kind of distributing them, and you used a couple fancy police cars to drop them off. And one thing we always said to some of our families was there'll be no arrest warrants issued at the time of dropping off gifts. And that's always been kind of a funny point for us. But no, it's been a wonderful program. I just want to thank Officer Mitchell and Officer Keating so much. It's just been wonderful for families. And you guys can say a few words if you want.
First, I'd like to thank Dave. He was able to arrange a lot of these families and get them to us so that we knew who we were giving the kids to. Ultimately, this year we were able to get about 70 kids gifts, which is a pretty big deal. These are kids that probably wouldn't be getting gifts for Christmas. So it was pretty fantastic. We want to thank the community for coming and grabbing an angel. We actually had a problem this year that we couldn't keep up with the angels as far as we didn't have enough. So next year we're hoping to double up the number, hoping to get at least 150 kids next year. And it's just so rewarding, and I want to thank the community because it was the community that came in, got those angels, and brought back the gifts. So I just want to thank everybody, and it was just super exciting. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mindy Mitchell, and this project is it's really special to all of us. We deal so much with families that we see in crisis, kids that don't have, what little things that maybe you and I take for granted every day. So thank you so much to everybody in the community for helping make this project such a success, and looking forward to this coming up here for Christmas. So thank you.
So, did you want to say some things? Or we would like to take a picture with you, so we'll get started with that. But would you like to say anything, or just?
I just can't say enough how much I thank you for your service, for what we do out there in the community, and being a CASA worker for 9 years. I know there's a lot out there, children out there that have less than many of us, so thank you for what you do. It means a lot.
And if we could all say, they make ASD great. All right. All right. Our next focus on staff and students, Charles Beatty and Miss Tina Johnson-Harris. If you're here, please come forward. And Kristen Dahl and Principal Luke Allman. Please come forward. Woo! Yay! Our next presentation is for the Alaskans for language acquisition. And I believe maybe Brandon Locke is here as well. Please come forward, Brandon. You're taking pictures. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are honoring two teachers who have been recognized by the Alaskans for Language Acquisition, AFLA. AFLA is a statewide professional association of world language educators committed to offering and improving opportunities for learning world languages in Alaska. The Joe Sanders Teacher of Passion and Energy is a new award for AFLA, and it's named in memory of Joe Sanders. Joe was a German educator in Alaska who taught at Bartlett High School and served as the driving force behind the creation of Rikashula. Did I get that right? We have a board member who knows. How'd I do, Dina? Okay, sorry. Her German's much better. That was her first language. This award is given to a teacher who embodies her traits, an individual who consistently goes above and beyond promoting world languages, who inspires students to reach further and motivates others in the profession to also do more. We are pleased to announce that Charles Beatty is the first recipient of this award and truly embodies these qualities. Fellow teacher Christy Zenden nominated Charles for this award and said, quote, Charles motivates and encourages students in the classroom and on exchange trips to Germany. He is a whirling dervish of energy, as Joe was, and in his early career, he has never hesitated to contribute to our profession, and he's contributed in all possible ways. Congratulations. All right. The Terry Higley Teacher of Excellence Awards is for an outstanding K-12 educator of a language other than English. Named in memory of Terry Higley, a French teacher who served in Alaska at Bartlett High School as well. It honors a world language teacher who is known to go above and beyond in promoting world languages, bridging culture, motivating students, and being an inspiration to the school climate. We are excited to announce that Kristen Dahl has been awarded the 2019 Terry Higley Teacher of Excellence Award. Woo, woo, all right. Over the years, Kristen has consistently worked to stay current in the newest and best methods for teaching language acquisition, which she happily shares with her colleagues and the many student teachers she has mentored over the years. She's constantly reworking her methods and materials, always with student success in mind. She's an enthusiastic AP teacher and works tirelessly to bring her students from the most basic level to the highest over their high school career. Her late nights, her skill in her craft, and her willingness to share with her colleagues have not gone unnoticed. Thank you, Charles and Kristen, both for your dedication, enthusiasm for students, and language. You make ASD great. All right, congrats. And of course, we're going to ask you to share a few words. And if you like, you can say how long you've been in ASD, or you can talk about your mom and dad, how proud they'd be too, I'm sure, whatever you'd like. But share a little bit with the crowd, just for us to know you, because we are certainly honored to be in the room with you.
Thank you. I'm very honored to have received the award. I teach German and actually am also a Bartlett graduate. So Joe was in fact my teacher. So it's kind of a double honor. Rilkeschule. And I've been with the ASD since Rilkeschule opened. And yeah, it's incredibly, I feel really honored about it. She was an amazing educator. Probably single-handedly the reason I became an educator as well. So I'm very touched to be able to pass that on, bring students to Germany, let them step outside of their bubble, and kind of push them to new levels.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I've been here teaching, I think it's my 22nd year now, and I started at Chugiak on the north end, and now I teach at South on the south end, so both ends. But I was inspired by my French teacher in high school, and it wasn't Terry Higley, but it started me on the path towards languages, and it's always been a passion of mine to learn how to communicate with people. And I wrote a little thing I can say. All right. I'm pretty... Perhaps. But I'm very humbled to receive this recognition because there's so many amazing world language teachers here in our district, and I'm very fortunate to have worked my career here because we have the immersion programs and we have all sorts of different languages taught in the high school, which doesn't happen everywhere. And the teachers here are dedicated and talented, and they also have a really wonderful community. And our organization, our state organization of language teachers, AFLA, meets every year, and we volunteer and bring teachers up and share with each other. And it's really been a source of growth and community, which is important as a professional teacher because it's hard work, and it's really nice to have that support. So I'm appreciative of everyone that has helped me and shaped my teaching along the years. And I just feel that as language teachers, we have the fortune of being able to help students learn to communicate and reach out to other communities. And language has helped us to work and love and understand and live more fully. And we're, as teachers, we have this purpose to humbly help open doors and open opportunities and open hearts. So thank you.
So my name is Dr. Elizabeth Dick. I'm here in two capacities. One is that I'm the Department Chair of World Languages at South High School with Kristen Dahl, and I'm also the outgoing president of AFLA, our teachers organization for world languages, and I know both of these colleagues quite closely. I can think of no better recipient then Charles Beatty for the Passion Award, and Joe Sanders. He's just taken on the Beast of Declamation, which he's in the middle of coaching and preparing for the entire region and for the state. And he, just like all of the German teachers, spends nearly a month out of our summers every other year to take students abroad, and he often helps other colleagues. I've also worked side by side with Kristen Dahl, and I'm so glad that she's getting recognition for all the hard work she pours into her classroom. She's often the person that if you go out to the parking lot at 6 p.m. after a day of high school, she's still there, and that's every day. And she's always looking up new things, always finding new ways to push her students higher, and I'm so proud to have both of you as colleagues. Thank you.
I just real quickly want to thank Dr. Bishop and the board for recognizing them. I think it's awesome to recognize great educators. I'll just echo what's already been said. Actually, the Saturday before we returned from break, we hosted a Thunder Mountain basketball game, and it started at 7:30, and Kristen I wondered why the light was on in her classroom. And so being the kid who always got told to turn the lights out when you leave, I just assumed that they should be off. But she was actually in there working the Saturday before at 7:30. So just thank her for her dedication. And I also just have to say that I get immersed in the language, and then I have to be sharp and know how to respond, because when I visit her classroom, I'm always greeted collectively by the entire class, no matter what level it is, in the target language. And then I have to remember my 5 years of Spanish and try to dig something out so I can respond to them. So it's been a good challenge for me too each time I step in her classroom. So congratulations to you both.
And again, thank you for your service. Can't do it without you, and don't want to. So thank you very much. You are what makes ASD great. And now we'll go over here for photos.
Thanks so much. Now I think I recognize you now. I know I asked you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Board is coming back. I believe Andy's joining us on the phone. Our student advisory representative is not here to give us a report tonight, but we have had other committee reports. So I guess, Ms. Bellamy, would you mind giving us your communications report? Sorry.
Madam Chair, the Communications Committee had its last meeting on January 14th. At that time, we did a recap of our legislative luncheon, looking at things that we could improve on for next year. Comments and recap was very positive for that event. The other thing we looked at was our legislative priorities for 2019-20. We had a draft, actually, of the collateral or the handout that we're going to be using for that. That was a draft. And then we talked a little bit about the next updates for our strategic planning, of which we're in phase 2. So that's it for the 14th. Our next meeting will be on February 11th in our board conference room, and that will be at 3 p.m.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hallman, I know you're on the phone. Do you want to give a report on governance?
I don't have my complete notes with me, and I apologize. I meant to be there tonight, and things have come up that have kept me away from home and being as prepared as I would normally need to be. We did meet on the 14th and reviewed administrative regulations. We did vote to bring forward policy on teleconferences as it relates to attendance by members and how that counts. We did talk at length about the organizational chart, and I believe we voted to simply leave that as is. And if I'm remembering incorrectly, someone's welcome to correct me on that. We discussed community invitations and tickets to events that board members are invited to, or we think there's a benefit to attending, and we're leaving that at the discretion of the president to kind of limit that and be the gatekeeper on those. We did review a proposed policy around responsible contractors, and the committee will be reviewing that later after we have time for administrative input. And that's the limit of what I've got in front of me right at the moment.
Okay, we appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Holloman. Ms. Michaelis.
We did have a finance committee meeting today where we went over the internal budget survey results. We had a budget discussion, and we talked about our FY20 fund balance projections, and as of right now, our next meeting is scheduled for February 18th, unless otherwise called for.
At this time, I'd kind of like to report on, we did have, I believe it was last weekend, we had a AJ come up from Council of Great City Schools, and we were working on our goals for the next 5 years, and he was very gracious in coming up and helping with us to review the data and to keep us focused and to remind us what our jobs are as a school board. And really, if you think about it, our job is to support the community's values, not to solve their issues. So we have to remember that, and that student outcomes do not change until adult behaviors change. In other words, when we place it in context of growing patterns of behavior that are exhibited in the boardroom can reasonably be expected to be found parallel in the classroom. And so as a board, I think we have made the commitment that we are going to focus more on student outcomes, inputs, and be the leader in the change that we want to see and the change that we want to see in our classrooms and the success of our students. And so I'm hoping, as you see, we will be refocusing our efforts at our school board meetings, and I just wanted to share that with the public. So thank you. So at this time, we have public testimony, but before I do that, and this is public testimony that's on non-action items. The board welcomes public comment on non-agenda and non-action items. We value public comment as it ensures that we remain aware of public thoughts, ideas, and concerns, and informs our decision-making process. There is a 1-hour time slot at the beginning of the meeting. Testimony in excess of 1 hour will be heard at the end of the meeting or may be submitted in writing. We have a table front and center with microphones available for testimony and when I call your name. You will have 3 minutes to testify, and you may begin speaking when the timer appears on the screen in front of you and begins the countdown. When you have 30 seconds left, the number will turn yellow. When the timer reaches 0, please finish your sentence. In order to provide equity to all that would like to speak, the board asks that there is no clapping after testimony, as it may intimidate others wishing to testify with opposing opinions. Additionally, it's not our practice that board members answer questions or engage in discussion with members of the public. This is your time to speak and our time to listen. The board will consider all information shared by the public, and when deemed necessary, issues raised in testimony will be referred to the administration for follow-up. And at this time, I don't have anyone signed up for testimony on non-action or non-agenda items. Is there anyone that would like to testify at this time? Okay, we're going to move forward then. And that would be the superintendent's update. Thank you, Dr. Bishop.
Thank you, Madam President. All right, they're going to boot up the update, and in light of the discussions that occurred over the weekend in the retreat, we are going to focus on, during this time, so that we can, because the agenda was already created, to really look at student outcomes, student outputs, and closing the achievement gap. Dr. Stock is going to assist me and share some information. This information is accessible to the public through our dashboard, and I'll share that at the end. It's also information that was presented when the board worked this weekend, or the prior weekend, on their goals with AJ. So these data are extant. They're already here. They exist. So just to start, student outcomes, and as the president mentioned in speaking about an outcome, there you go, it's basically a simple measure of a school system results that are student results rather than adult results. Outcomes that are a measure of what students know or able to do. So the board is in action now to set 1 to 5 goals coming for the succession plan for Destination 2020, and we'll continue that the second meeting in February through the work session. However, we do have goals for the school district, and they have been named Destination 2020, and they've been in existence since 2011. Created at that time and implemented a little bit over time through many different boards and many different superintendents. For 2019-20, at the summer meeting, the board asked that rather than the 6 different goals, to really narrowly focus our efforts on, or deliberately rather, on performance, attendance, and safety. And I'm just going to share a little bit of the information that would look like the outcome that the board's request of the school district. So for the board as well as for the public to understand what that will look like in our board meetings. So our performance goal is that 90% of students will be proficient in reading, writing, and math. And this is just one performance goal. We also look at college courses that are preparing kids right now for performance. But I'm just going to go over the reading one specifically. Outputs are the result of a particular set of inputs that is usually knowable in the midst of a cycle, and that is a measure of the implementation of the program or strategy. And so these definitions came right from our training, but basically an output are those smaller time units that will let the board know those updates and checks monthly. If we have a goal that spans 1 to 3 years, the outputs would need to be given in quicker time to see if we're on the right track or not. And just really taking a look at what are the outputs that we're doing, how are students doing now that's giving them the path to meet those outcomes. So with that, I'm going to share some of the present not only outcomes. I shared the outcome, which was the goal for reading, 90%, but here are some outputs that are presently reviewed by the board and actually presented to the board through their workshop.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. So just from listening to some of the board comments at the retreat, I appreciated being there and being able to participate and listen. And one of the things that I heard was, so how does that look for a board? Like, if we've spent 50% of our board meetings really working off of this idea of student outcomes, how's that look in a board setting? So what I'd like to do is just kind of walk through what we call the through line from an outcome at the board level all the way down to Johnny Jones in one of the schools. Like, how does that through line work if a board was focused on those outcomes? So the first example is just an output that comes from Peaks. You're aware of this. What you'll see here is that about 40% of our third graders at third grade are proficient currently, but at ninth grade it's about 36%. But as an output, one of the things that the board would spend time with us engaged in discussion is what you see along the left, which are the student groups. So while that's not stated as an outcome, one of those outputs that we would bring to you and we would discuss over time are how are our student groups doing with regards to that. Next slide talks a little bit about another type of an output, and this, while it's not a very attractive looking slide, just simply shows the 3 years of trends. Okay, we have 3 years of Peaks data. So one of the questions a board might say is, okay, so that's how 40% are proficient, but what direction are we headed? And so one of those outputs that a board might spend time over the course of a year tracking would be trend data. That trend data could be by individual student groups trends. Could be by grade level trends, could be school trends, a variety of ways that we might spend time with the board over time trying to engage in those discussions. Next one is another form of an output, and we offer the measurement for academic progress, MAP growth assessments. And in this one, we would spend time with the board over the course of a year trying to drill down and look at two different types of achievement. One is what we would call status or high achievement, and that is where a student or a school is actually performing at, and then growth, which is, well, how far are they moving? How fast are they growing and changing? And so we can graph that in different ways, and this is just a screenshot we took from our MAP scores from last year's fall to spring, and we put schools into categories where we can look at high achievement, high growth, etc. And you can see how those current trends are based on the MAP data. Another form of drilling down even deeper would be, as this through line goes from the outcome to an output at the district level to a school, now we can drill into individual schools. And so we have access. This is just a static screenshot, but if I were to click in the live database on one of those schools, I would begin to drill down into specific pieces of that school. For example, I could take a look at any of our student groups along the left, or any of our grade spans or subjects, for example, and then I can drill down as to how all the different schools within those grade spans or student groups are performing. So the next slide is just an example of how you would then could drill into one particular school. So then I could take that and we could drill down and look at the school level, and then the next slide shows how you drill from there into the student groups to look at how those are doing on either achievement, which is their overall performance, or their growth from fall to spring, which is how fast are they changing. Another output, this one is where we get into K2. Some of you remember that we switched from AimsWeb to FastBridge. We have a new assessment that's very similar in a lot of ways to the data that we got from AimsWeb, but this replaced that. And on this particular slide, I'm just trying to demonstrate that as a board, as we begin to look at these outputs that go with the outcomes, you can see along the left, you just see the names of all the schools. And in this case, principals and directors and staff have the ability to drill down and look at the fall, winter, spring results in our K2 classrooms and try to look at how those students who are at risk, some risk, or no risk, how those students are doing. And again, this is an example of the type of report boards might wish to know more about if we're going to spend time on how are we really doing. This would be another example at the K2 level that would apply. The next slide shows taking that and drilling further. So at the school, I can then break it into grade levels, and I can go look at K and 1 and 2 and so on, and look at how various grade levels are doing. I can look at how we are predicting them to do based on their fall score, how we would think or hope that they would do in the spring. The next one shows how the schools now take that and they begin to drill down and look closer. So this is an example of a classroom, and we blocked out student names. There's actual student names attached to this. But a teacher, a principal, a grade level, a reading coach, those who are trying to drill in and look at, say, our goal or our outcome of improving third grade reading proficiencies, how does that get down to the classroom and to the actual teacher to know what to do? And across the top, you'll see various outcomes like the curriculum-based measure, nonsense words, and so on. You'll see actual indicators of what areas that student is struggling with. Almost there, we're getting there. Last couple left. This one shows how you could take the student names and drill down to phonemic awareness, the phonics, the general reading skills, etc. And then we begin to drill down. Now we're getting into areas that at the student level that the board would not be addressing with you, but this shows how the staff would be addressing it separately. This one shows the rate of growth. One of the terms that we kicked around in our retreat was that idea of catch-up growth. Like if we're really trying to close an achievement gap, you can't do that without growing faster than other students are growing and changing from fall to spring. This shows one of the graphs that teachers have access to that takes an individual student, and it shows their trajectory, which is that blue line, which shows how much gain are they making.
And that student, you can see, if you take a look at where they started and how they're increasing more than what is expected. So they are making a little bit more gain than what is expected. You see how that line is, it's not with the trend of those colors.
Yeah. And we have another example that gets to that as well. This is our next to last example, but this is just trying to demonstrate that when those groups in the elementary schools have what we're calling win time, what I need, where they're breaking out separately and trying to drill down onto the skills that students are missing, this just shows that the data in FastBridge gives you the exact miscues, the exact words, the exact sounds, the exact phonics pieces that they're struggling with, and then it allows the teacher who's working with those students to get down to that level. So you can kind of start to see how an overall outcome at the board level of improving third grade proficiency rates, how we have to break that all the way down to that student level to really make those kind of gains as a district.
And you'll see that when we have a goal for the board, or which is a student goal about student progress, that we have in our schools, there's an array of different where people are right now. And so as we're moving towards that goal, the work will look different in the different schools. Some schools, Mark refers to them as headwinds, that they have different headwinds or side winds than others. Or maybe some schools, their students have tailwinds that really have propelled them forward already. And so when the board has a goal, we wanted to share how we have tools to be able to actualize what does this mean in each school. Because if each school improves, and then at the school level, if they say, well, if each grade level improves, and at the grade level, and if they say, well, if each student improves, all that flow line, what Dr. Stock's talking about, will move up and rise all boats, if you will, in ASD. And so we use data just to give us the information we need to show where the work is. Where does the work need to be in order to narrow that achievement gap? And again, we're not looking just to narrow the achievement gap, because the top could pull down and you've narrowed a gap. What we want is the expected growth, which is a year for a year. Those that are behind, we absolutely need catch-up growth. And so we're finding ways, putting extra time into students to get that catch-up growth. Mark?
So we have one more graph, and this one is a really nice demonstration of what Dr. Bishop just articulated very well. This just shows the visual picture of a real student. It shows their projected line to proficiency is the second dotted line below. The rate of growth of this student is exceeding that. And the little round dots represent the progress monitoring checks that the teacher has been making along the way to try to track that. And so then the through line kind of shows if that student keeps at this rate and keeps growing, that student is going to be one of those successes that show up in your district outcome, your board goal of third graders being more proficient when they leave third grade for reading. This shows a student who will be one of those that's a success story on that line of the student board outcome that you had set. So in summary, the last slide, just a quick summary before Dr. Bishop closes it up. There's three pieces. So at your level, at the board level, what would our board meetings look like if we adopt that strategy that AJ talked about in the retreat? We would try to spend more significant chunks of time in these meetings trying to get to the roots of how are we doing, taking your outcomes, learning how to break those down. Last year, we put together kind of an annual reporting of how different metrics could be reported over time. But with what the retreat you've just done, that takes it to another level of where we would literally be not just all on admin, but we would be accountable to you to explain our outputs that are hopefully they're our benchmark for tracking our progress towards your outcome goal. So there's our district and department leadership level things. There's school-wide things that we would talk with you about, which schools are doing well, which schools are struggling with it, what grade levels, what student groups. And then number 3 primarily would fall at the school level, where we would be looking at individual students through our problem solving through MTSS. So those would be the levels of reporting that could occur. And at our level here at the board level would be primarily 1 and 2.
Yeah. So wanted to take you to the dashboard just to share again in a just global sense in regard to this of where this information stays, and so that our parents, our schools, our community can also take a look. Now there are data that we have an internal system, and then not until a quarter ends is it posted to the external. So there are sometimes where MAP scores and things like that are on our internal system. And I do want you to know that Mark and the team, they're working on 2 things for MAP to make it easier. Number 1, a teacher availability so that they have everything at their fingertips. They don't have to go to this for this, this for this, attendance for this, that they would have maybe a dashboard that they can use and set up in their classrooms for how they'd like. But also we would take, looking at taking the board goals, and we have this beta testing internally now, taking the board goals, the outputs, as well as the strategies for what we want, and really taking a look at that school by school and really by colors. You could have 3 colors, whether it's green, red, and yellow, on target or moving, progressing, however we wanted to label it, so that on any one given goal or any one given outcome or output, we would be able to take a look and just scan it. And that's also being worked on. So we're really working with NWEA as well as internally to create those. I do believe, and it's been said in regard to narrowing maybe the assessments we give, I foresee Alaska moving just to MAP, so it's good that we have so many internal experts that are really creating these products that once teachers use them and then we release them, the biggest impact for these data and graphs is for students to use them. A second grader can see, oh, I'm on the right path or I'm not. If you noticed the 2 times that it was monitored on that real report, right after break, where did it go? It flattened out. So right at the beginning of December, the child was making progress, and you look December, or it hit January 2nd, January 13th, or whatever. It just like, whoop, took a little dip, and then we have to go back up. So, and that's what data tell us, like what happened in between? Well, we know, vacation, of course. So, but taking a look at this, here's your dashboard. And it can be accessed if you, on the main site. This is under families or community, right at the top, right when you initially go to ASD K-12. It resides in both those places for the outward look. And it talks about measuring progress in the Anchorage School District. And I don't know if we wanted to boot it up now or just share this picture, go live, or, oh, just the picture. Under this, due to time's sake, in the dashboard, you'll see those goals, and then you'll see performance. So everything is public. Then the board's goal is 90% of students will be proficient in reading, writing, and math. The manner in which we're looking at those for SMART goals are really the reading proficiency of elementary, math proficiency, and increase. And the assessments that are being used are the actual tiles. So there's state proficiency assessments, student MAP growth results, and K2 benchmarking. Now, we will recreate this and narrow this, knowing what we know that under what the board specifically, what data they specifically want to look at for a certain goal. So we had a reading goal 40 to 80% proficiency on peaks. That goal and peaks will reside in that goal when we redesign the new system. Right now, these are the three that were the data for which the goals were originally set up to review. If you look at safety as well as attendance, you'll see the different thumbnails that will give you the information about the outputs. What we'll be doing with the board, with the president, once the board decides on the outcomes, they'll also look at the different outputs they'd like to see and kind of review that with us. We'll set a calendar for what will be presented each month at the board meeting and your determination, and then we will bring forward the data. This is just to share where we pull the data, that it is here. We use the saying all the time, you have to know it to grow it. So we don't look at this even when we have schools in quadrants. We just need to know, where are we and where do I want to go? Because if you don't know where you're starting and where you want to end, setting a goal and making that journey is very difficult to get to where you want to go if you don't know where you're starting. So again, we've, I would say schools, classrooms, really at the district level, the directors, these data and talking about their individual school goals are all part of the evaluation system for principals presently. And we've just moved from 4 years ago not having any public outline like this to actually using them. We have quite a bit of tools. We are definitely not data poor. What we want to do is, they have a saying, you want to become information rich. So we want to find a way to display our data, to talk about our data so that the information the board desires, we become very information rich in the progress of ASD through the outputs. And with that, that was just a major overview in regard to just taking a look and kind of having a mind's eye from the discussions about how this could look so that we take your input how you'd like to see it.
Ms. Hildy?
Well, thank you. It's all very exciting, and I'm hoping we're moving this. I was hoping today that we really do start seeing some data during the meeting, and we had talked about maybe looking at absenteeism, pulling up the data dashboard and actually looking at that starting today, not in a perfect way, but that we're going to say, let's start doing this. And so I don't know if that's possible or...
We talked about that. I think there needed a little bit more time to figure out exactly what we wanted. And so this was a way to introduce to us how they could present it to us and give us an option of how we wanted to look at it and maybe define that a little better.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to the next meeting.
Any other comments, questions? All right.
I move to approve the consent agenda, ASD Memorandum Number 077 Personnel Report, and November 5th, 2019 Regular Session Minutes.
Is there a second? Okay. Board members, please vote. And that passes with 7 yeas unanimously. Okay, before we, student hearing, sorry.
I move to approve the expulsion of the student associated with ASD incident number 1312332 as discussed in executive session.
Second.
Board members, please vote. And that motion passes with 7 yeas. So at this time, before we start with public testimony, I need to read our how we proceed with public testimony. And the procedures for agenda item testimony are as follows. An action item memo is first introduced by the Vice President, and if seconded by another board member, I will open the floor for public testimony. If you have signed up in advance or indicated you are interested in providing testimony, I will call you to come to the front table to speak. You have 3 minutes to talk, and you will see a timer in the screen in front of you to monitor the time remaining and inform you of when you need to conclude. After all testimony closes, I will open the floor for board discussion, followed by the student board representative vote before finally calling for the official vote. The voting results will be displayed on the screen to my right.
I move to approve ASD Memorandum Number 80 and authorize the superintendent to accept a grant from the Alaska Department of Education and Early Development in the amount of $364,019 for the first year of a 5-year comprehensive literacy instruction project to improve literacy outcomes for students at Service High School.
Second.
Okay. Is there any public testimony on Memorandum 080? Seeing no testimony, is there any board discussion? So I do want to make a comment about this. I think this is very exciting, and the fact that Service High School has gotten this grant, kudos to them. It's a 5-year grant. I think it's going to bring, I look forward to seeing the results and how this has worked, and when we talk about outputs, this is one of the inputs, and very anxious to see what happens with this because I know it'll be good things. So if there's no other comments, board members, please vote. Okay, sure.
Madam President, since you brought it up, I'll just share a little bit more interest in that. Jenny Knutsen's group worked along with Frank, but others, schools were interested as well. So Service went after the grant with their team as well as Dr. Knutsen's team for reading. But simultaneously, while we do those improvements, East High will, or it was at East or Bartlett that both East and Bartlett are going to monitor those inputs that we're receiving the funds for. The intent is to use their title funds in the same manner to truly impact that equity and reading. So we actually have 3 schools. We were provided a grant for one of them because we maximize the ask for that, but we actually have 3 high schools that will be moving along this project.
Wow, kudos, guys. That's thinking outside of the box. Great job. Appreciate that. Okay, any other comments? Okay, board members, please vote. And Memorandum 080 passes with 7 yeas.
I move to approve ASD Memorandum Number 70 and authorize the superintendent to award a contract for the Service High School Health and Life Safety Improvements Building E and F Gym project to Roger Hickle Contracting Incorporated for a total award amount of $4,297,070.
Second.
Is there any public testimony on Memorandum 070? Okay, seeing none, is there any board discussion? No board discussion, please vote. And Memorandum 070 passes with 7 yeas.
I move to approve ASD Memorandum Number 75 and waive Board Policy 3311.1.2 use of apprentices for all earthquake recovery procurements that are subject to FEMA reimbursement to ensure compliance with 2 CFR 200.319. This recommendation is due to the compliance review performed by the FEMA Procurement Disaster Assistance Team, PDAT.
Second.
Okay, at this time, I would call for any public testimony on Memorandum 075. And if I can have 2 at a time come up front if you want to testify and give your name. Okay. Seeing none, we will open it up for board discussion. Mr. Donnelly?
Thank you. So the issue presented to us is whether or not our existing policy, which encourages the hiring of apprentices on school district construction projects, would somehow put in jeopardy our ability to recoup funds from FEMA for earthquake projects. So to negate those concerns, first of all, we have FEMA's own rules. FEMA's formal guidance to recipients is that they should follow their existing procurement rules. That's the general guideline that FEMA's published guidelines to recipients states. And FEMA does have a regulation, a list of prohibited procurement practices. But tellingly, apprenticeship policies are not on that list of prohibited practices. Next, FEMA does have written policy that FEMA defaults generally to local rules when they directly, even when they directly conflict with federal rules, unless it's a matter of, quote, primarily a federal concern. And obviously, apprenticeship is not a primary federal concern. It's a concern for everybody to encourage the development of our workforce in these construction trades, because we all know that we're losing workers from the construction trades at a really rapid, faster than we can replenish them in our economy and our workforce. And then FEMA also has a rule that when there is a direct conflict between a federal and a local rule, the, quote, more restrictive rule should be followed. And obviously, the existence of a apprenticeship policy is more restrictive than the lack of apprenticeship policy. So once again, FEMA's own rules say that the apprenticeship policy is okay. Second, we have what the FEMA administrators have told us. On January 7th, in an email to Senator Murkowski, the FEMA Region 10 branch director stated, although it could increase scrutiny, quote, the apprentice program would not bar the school district from receiving federal funds. That's pretty straightforward. And it was repeated in an email to Mr. Whiting on December 20th where the FEMA director, the regional director, said the inclusion of apprenticeship program does not exclude ASD from female public assistance funds. But we have more than that as evidence that this really isn't a problem. And third, we have, while we have examples of FEMA funding agencies with apprentice programs, including Los Angeles and those in Washington State, and we have the correspondence from the folks in Washington State saying that they have funded their emergency impacted programs where there was apprenticeship programs. We have absolutely no example of FEMA ever denying funding to an applicant because of an apprenticeship program. So we have examples of them saying, yeah, we're going to give you the money, but we have absolutely no examples of the member saying, no, you have an apprenticeship program, we're not going to give you any money. There was a point raised at some point that the rule in Los Angeles was slightly different than our rule in that it was a point system, but in Washington State, they do have a hard and fast percentage requirement. So that is an example that's very similar to the existing policy here. And fourth, even if FEMA, for the first time ever, found an apprenticeship program a problem, the FEMA rules, as confirmed by the District 10 Regional Director email, are that FEMA would, quote, perform a cost reasonableness analysis and obligate the reasonable costs associated with the project. So the direction from FEMA is that even if, after all this evidence to the contrary, there was some issue with having an apprenticeship policy, they would only consider the additional cost that that apprenticeship policy created. And that's also consistent with their regulations and their guidance, their published guidance to applicants. So let's think about that for a second. By law, all contracts on these earthquake repair projects are going to have to comply with our current prevailing wage laws. There's no question about that. So that there are very few exceptions to that, but you know what one of the exceptions is? Paying apprentices. You can pay apprentices less than what you would pay a full journey person. So contractors that have apprentice programs actually might be able to pay less. They might be more competitive. And that's what one of the overall goals of FEMA is, to save money as we do these repairs. And when they would do that cost-benefit analysis, it's very unlikely it would ever result in an increased cost. And even if it did, they would discount it by whatever balanced against it. So it'd be a very, very small percentage of the total cost of any potential reimbursement. So finally, what would inspire FEMA to do this? Well, I think it's important to note that FEMA, as a general policy, supports apprenticeship programs with multiple federal programs that they participate in. They have the Presidential Management Fellows Program. They have the Student Career Experience Program. They have the Student Temporary Employment Program. They have the Federal Work Study Program. They have the Student Volunteer Employment Program. They participate very actively and promote apprenticeship. So since it's certainly part of their culture, why would they in turn around and for the first time in American history decide, whoa, we don't like apprenticeship and we're not going to go along with this? So given all that analysis, Madam President, I just don't believe there's a significant enough threat to any significant funding that might be possible to get reimbursed here to justify suspension of this very important and valuable policy that really helps us deal with, promotes an assistant to what is overwhelmingly former ASD students, as we've seen from prior testimony on the subject, and also deals with an important pressing need to our economy, and that's developing our workforce in these areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Townley. Is there any other board member that would like to have a question or comment? Pardon? Andy?
I'll simply reiterate that I think Member Donnelly makes good points on this. And I couldn't go into the same level of detail. But it was critical to me in adopting this policy to begin with that it not excessively cost the district money, that it not raise our costs. And I truly believe it does not or will not when it's properly implemented. So I'm not sure I see the value in waiving it. And also concur that if FEMA comes in and simply looks at the difference in cost, that you can actually make the argument that it saves money. I think it saves money as well as benefiting the community as a whole. So if there was a minor cost, I think it's bearable. But I actually believe that an analysis could find that it does not add expense. And I will be voting not in favor of the waiver. Thank you.
Any other board members? Mrs. Bellamy.
I guess I mean, this is one of those things where I think we're all trying to figure out how does it improve student outcomes and tell us what kids really know and are able to do. I mean, I wasn't on the board when the policy was put in place. I like the policy. I think it gives value to our long-term commitment to the to our youth, to our students. But I do have a couple of questions. and I'm just not sure. I mean, we're talking about the risk to the, I've heard the word substantial risk to the Anchorage School District, and I think we need, I would like to hear more about that substantial risk. And I also respect the work that the staff has done, and I just want to make sure that I have the parameters of what that risk is.
Okay. Dr. Bishop.
Thank you, Madam President, through the President to Member Bellamy. And I'll request Tom Roth as well as George Vacalis to come forward. In a nutshell, they can go into the detail, but the risk has been assessed by the experts, other people, legal people, the PDAT, and then our legal team. And the risk isn't about apprentices necessarily. It is about the narrowing of the competition. And so they don't say apprentices, they say the narrowing of the competition. And in the documents, it does say if ASD does move forward with the apprenticeship program, as is some or all of the reimbursement funding may be at risk if they do not comply with federal procurement requirements. And then it does go on further to say that the probability of that, and generally what might happen, is the difference between what they believe is a competitive price and if they find something that was paid more, that the difference, so Member Donnelly spoke to that the difference might be charged. However, we're still working on the insurance. We also have projects for mitigation, which the procurement is a piece of this as well through Fema. And as a public agent of public money, my responsibility is to our community and the use of those public funds. And you weigh risks, and in black and white, the risks have been presented in front of me. Therefore, the recommendation came to say and to create this waiver, not to eliminate an apprentice policy, not to be against an apprentice policy, but what the apprentice policy proposes or has come to with FEMA isn't about apprentices, it's about the competition of the RFPs. That's what they're focused on. And I'll have the experts really talk about it, but in a general sense, the recommendation that came through administration is a conglomeration of going back out to task, the board's task to us to find information, and what we've come back with, frankly, is more solid information that says, yes, the PDAT, in support of the PDAT, which was presented initially.
So through the board president to Member Bellamy. So if I might, we'll be very mindful not to reiterate what was presented to the school board this evening by legal counsel. I do want to, if I might start, Member Bellamy did ask the question earlier this evening, what's still out there? What other projects potentially are not impacted? And I'll put it in the context right now that the district is looking at about $680 million of deferred maintenance. Clearly, the majority of that would not be impacted by anything related to this FEMA procurement restriction. So right now we're looking at about 55 million in deferred, in earthquake damages specifically, and then a like amount in what are either 404 or 406 mitigation grants, which as was presented previously, those also are subject to the same procurement rules as the earthquake damages. So I'll pause and we'll open up to answer any questions or receive any comments from the board.
And Madam President, I don't know if I clearly, you wanted to know what was at risk?
What was at risk, yes.
Okay.
And the other question he had anticipated
Okay.
already.
Okay.
So I'll come back around.
Was
I
the,
don't think the question was answered, was it?
the difference between what they believe would be the expected cost?
The question, my second question would have been, what those non-impacted projects, so what would be, so my understanding is this, so maybe I'll come at it this way. So my understanding is, so my understanding is that we have a bond of which we are hoping to get FEMA money, and that is no guarantee, no promise. All right? And so here we feel we need to, the recommendation or the motion is to waive the apprenticeship policy for earthquake impacted schools.
For any project that could be eligible
For FEMA.
in total or in part for federal and or state public assistance or reimbursement.
Okay, so if we've already, and we have a bond, this is not connected to the bond at all? This has to be part of that, right? Because we know that we're not guaranteed any money from FEMA.
So
We have to apply for it.
So through the president to member Bellamy, I think if I might, I'll. So the bond that the board passed and the assembly recently passed, going on the ballot on the 7th of April, that is very heavily laden with earthquake repairs and projects which fall into this category, the waiver that we're requesting. But any projects, with some exception for 2019, but 2018 and the majority of 2019, those projects are not earthquake damage related, and they would be subject to the existing board policy on apprentice utilization. I mean, I guess we could go into specifics, but that's really kind of how it breaks out. In the one example where 2019 Eagle River Elementary School, the board approved a $6 million project to replace the roof, which now that we have the earthquake damage, that's additive to earthquake repairs. So that potentially would be affected by this request for a waiver. So that would be an example.
Madam President, if I might, so yes, there's a bond, but everything that could be requested through FEMA will be. So we're trying to use the best value for the school district of public funds. And so if we can acquire a reimbursement,
That cuts.
right, so we're just trying to find best value for public money and do our due diligence in applying to FEMA for mitigation. We've already done it for removal of debris, things like that, the initial, which we did receive full reimbursement for. So this would be mitigation as well as seismic mitigation, as well as fixing the buildings. So yes, they're on the bond, and yes, we would like to apply to FEMA for those funds.
I just drew a blank on your name, sorry. Ms. Mitchell.
Mr. Roth, I just want to clarify. So you're saying that essentially there's $55 million worth of capital projects that are directly related to earthquake damage, and then there's $55 million that are mitigation. So there's a total of $110 million that we would waive.
I'm going to ask Mr. Vacalis to address the breakdown of what is earthquake damage repair and what would be mitigation grant.
Okay. So there's actually $54 million and change of damage that does qualify for reimbursement. And we're in the process, of course, of working that out with FEMA now. There's also mitigation grants that the district is applying for. And depending on the qualification of those grants, in other words, if they qualify, then it could be up to another $50 million. Again, that is also in the process. Now, we've written some of the grants, because there's several different mitigation grant programs. And so one of them has a more stringent suspense date, and that's the one that we've concentrated on first. And that's the state one, where there's no obtain and maintain insurance requirement, but there is the same requirement as far as procurement. Now, the hope is that when it's all said and done, that the district will prevail with convincing the state commissioner of director of insurance, as well as FEMA, that because of where we are in Alaska and because of the costs and how difficult it is to get insurance, then part of that or all of that may be waived, and that's what we're shooting for. Now, what's important about that, and getting back to Ms. Bellamy's question, is that if in fact we do qualify for and receive public assistance monies, and we're able to get some relief on the insurance requirement, then the money that's in that bond that we're talking about, this year's bond, then an awful lot of that would be reimbursed by FEMA, and that money could go towards everybody's concern, deferred maintenance or whatever, and there would be no strings attached to it procurement-wise, because that would already been covered under a bond. If I've explained that correctly to you, if you understand that. Okay. So that's why I think we need to really make sure that we have all of our options available to us, because we still got a long way to go to work all of these things out. And all of you know, and you've all, it's to some degree, worked with the federal government, it takes time and it takes a lot of negotiating. So that's where we're at.
So just to clarify then, the waiver would apply to roughly $105 million worth of projects.
It would certainly apply to the public assistance monies for the damage, which the majority of that's on the bond, but there is also some damage that's not on the bond that could be taken care of by reimbursement monies, right? And then in addition to that, there could be up to another $50 million in mitigation grants, and it'd be district-wide.
So, and is it, I know that in the past when we have bonded for projects, we can't just use that money for something else. We have to go back to the voters and ask them to, or that has been our practice, I think, is to go back to the voters and ask them to approve that. So you're saying if $55 million of the $82 million bond that we're asking for is reimbursed, then we can just use our discretion and turn that $55 million to other projects that are on the CIP?
If we have already paid for, through bonds or whatever means, for the repair of these buildings that were damaged in an earthquake, then the money that came back to the district through reimbursement or whatever would basically be money that could be used by the district for other projects, because it's not tied to a bond. It's tied to the project. But if the district has already front-loaded and paid for that damage, then that money could come back, and that money could be used for deferred maintenance, and also it could be used for other projects that are not on that bond where we have damage to the schools.
So I have a question on the award of contract for the Service High School Health and Life Safety Improvements. Was that earthquake related? No.
Through the president. No, that's a 2018 bond project.
Okay, because I just remember some damage or something to a school. The other thing I wanted to know is on the, you talked about that we've already been reimbursed for some funds for removing debris or whatever.
So if I might just clarify, we have submitted for and have received confirmation for Category A and Category B. We have not at this point received funds yet, but we're expecting that the amounts that we submitted for have been approved and that money will be remitted at some point.
So Category A, we've signed on the dotted line saying that we will accept the money if we receive it, when we receive it. Right. We've not received it yet, and it's about $515,000. In addition to that, Category B covers two different things. One is emergent repairs. A was for debris removal, but category B is emergent repairs, non-permanent. That amounts to about $6.1 million. We have provided the paperwork. It's being scrutinized now by FEMA. And then if, in fact, they agree with all our numbers, then again, they'll go through the same process, send us a letter saying we agree with these numbers, and then asking us to go ahead and, say that we will accept the grant. That's still pending. And then in addition to that is the 6 million, that's damages that we're in the process of negotiating with FEMA now. Category E.
So I just have one follow-up question because I want to clarify this point. On our debris removal or whatever that was that something the ASD did itself, or did we contract someone to do that?
Combination of both. We contracted and we also did some ourselves.
Madam President, I think we're thinking about the same thing. When we did do that work, we borrowed from ourselves to immediately pay. And so the reimbursement from FEMA is basically going to repay the district for funds that we already spent for those two categories. So if you'd like, I think we were thinking about the same thing, like who did this work and where did that money go? Because I remember you asking about that at a prior work session. Mr. Anderson, can you share again where those initial funds? So when we spend money, we like to reimburse the money that we used it from our revolving account.
Absolutely. When the earthquake first happened, we went to the board early January, asked for an upper limit increase of $30 million. At that time, honestly, we didn't know how much we would be spending very quickly, nor how quick FEMA reimbursement would occur, so we wanted to give ourselves a little flexibility. So we did forward fund using part of our savings in the municipal investment pool, about $9 million. Now that includes overtime for our own people, contracts, other things. So the first money that we get back from FEMA, the first to pay ourselves back, about $9 million would go towards getting us back to zero. And then any additional, that discussion occurred a few minutes ago as to the flexibility from using it for other earthquake projects that are not on this bond, or other higher priority projects where you wouldn't have to go back to the public and even ask for a bond. There's numerous options for the board if and when we get FEMA reimbursement.
So my question is, did we use our policy to hire the contractor to remove the debris?
No, for two reasons. One reason was it was under emergent conditions, and so that procedure is a different procedure altogether. But number two, and more importantly, you had not approved the policy at that time.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Holding.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this point, I've heard extensive advice that there is a risk of the district being denied reimbursement. I'm personally inclined to believe the people who work in this district who are tasked with implementing our board goals, but we've had outside advice, expert advice as well, including FEMA's own lawyers, that this policy puts the public's money at risk of not getting reimbursed. As Member Bellany mentioned, is this about improving what kids know are able to do? By the board's own assessment 2 weekends ago, only 5% of our time is spent on student outcomes. When board members say that we don't have time to talk about how well students are learning in our district, this is a prime example of us spending time and money on things that are not directly related to improving student outcomes. My personal preference is to move away from the entire policy because of the time and money we put into it, but there isn't support for that on the board, and I'm not going to spend time doing things just for the sake of doing them. What I do want to say is that changing the policy does not mean you don't like apprentices. Apprentice programs are incredible. All the reasons Member Donnelly mentioned, it doesn't mean you don't like them. It doesn't mean we can't continue to support and have positive relationships and make sure our students are ready to enter those apprentice programs. That's a real outcome that I would love to see happening that's not currently happening. But it does mean that I'm not willing to risk the public's money to pay for this policy. So that's where I'm at.
Ms. Vacalis.
We have board policy 9000, which is the role of the school board and its members. And it says the school board's primary goal is to provide each student with an education of the highest quality in keeping with his or her capacity to learn. This goal shall be the basic factor motivating the school board's execution of its powers and duties. The retreat that we had that we've referenced a couple of times, we were looking at a goal that didn't make the cut, but it was a goal on pre-K. And, you know, one of the members, you know, for not supporting it had cited that it was outside of our K-12 mission, as well as some other concerns. This entire policy happens to fall outside of K-12. The costs so far with this program, just in hiring the additional staff to help manage it, you know, so that, you know, we're managing our risk and, you know, legality with it. It's, depending on the teacher, it could be 2.5 to 3 teachers worth of value. And if we're trying to focus on our kids in the classroom and things like PTR with our upcoming, you know, deficits, it's stuff like this that we can look at to try and help keep our resources where they need to be. The whole policy, whether in part or in whole, you know, we're not banning apprentices or trying to say no to apprentices or that we don't support them, much like, you know, member Higley just, you know, said, we support it and we encourage it, but there might be other ways to do it, you know, to member Donnelly's thing, you know, the LA Unified, you know, where it's a point system or something like that. There might be other ways that we can look at doing it. But right now it's public funds. We don't know what that dollar amount might be, whether it is a little amount or a lot amount or the time component or legal fees to defend ourselves in one way or another. I can't support taking these additional steps when we've had as much input as we have had, and when it clearly goes away from what our mission and our goals are, you know, as a school board.
So I will say that as a board, we did pass the apprenticeship policy, regardless of everyone's individual thoughts. It is a policy we passed. We're going to support that. As far as having a discussion on this, I think it's very important that we have this discussion, even though it may not focus, and not everything we do is going to focus on student outcome. And I'm just going to say that because I do support student outcomes, but I do think this discussion is very important. It's a very important decision that the board has to make. And so if there is any other board comments, I would like to hear them now. If not, we're going to vote. Andy, does anyone say anything else?
No, I'm on the record. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So is there any other board comments or questions? Okay, with that, we're going to vote. Thank you, gentlemen. You'll have to wait. Oh, okay. So we'll have to have members please revote. Did Andy vote? Yes. So the memorandum 075 fails with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nays.
I move to approve AST Memorandum Number 81 and support Assembly Resolution Number 2019-044 addressing dangerous street crossing for school students.
Second.
Do we have any public testimony on Memorandum 081? Seeing no public testimony, do we have any board discussion? Yes.
I highlighted last time that I wouldn't be supporting, I mean, you know, I don't support resolutions very often, but we're already doing the work that this talks about. I want to do the work with the assembly. If there's something they want to do, let's do it. I don't want to talk about doing it. I want to do it. So that's where I'm at.
And I guess I would ask, aren't we already participating on committees with the municipality as far as safety?
Madam President, yes, our safety, that's actually our committee, and they have representatives, we have representatives. So yes, Madam, that's affirmative.
And there are community members on those committees? Okay. Yes. All right. So is there any recommendation to do anything differently? Than any amendments, or do we just want to, you know, or is everybody, no questions, no comments? Are we ready to vote? Okay, board members, please vote. Oh, I'm sorry, Andy?
Yes, I just wanted to say, I think there's a public perception here that there's not an easy way for members of the public to raise concerns and feel like they're fully being looked at. Our joint committee does great work, and I haven't quite figured out how we can look at what they're doing, and I don't want to duplicate it, and I don't want to go sideways with it. But at the same time, members of the public are having trouble understanding that we really are hearing them. So I plan to vote yes to support the resolution. If nothing else, to say to the Assembly, yes, we will work with you on it. We do want to make sure that the public feels like they've got input and that they're heard. And that I think is the main message this sends. Thank you.
Okay. Any other board comments, questions? Board members, please vote. Went away. No. Andy, could we have your vote?
You can do a voice vote if you want.
Andy, can you give us a voice vote?
Oh, it just came through.
Oh, never mind.
She got it.
Oh, okay, thank you. And that motion passes with 5 yeas and 2 nays. All right, so at this time, we are looking at non-action items. There's only one non-action item on there. Is it anything anybody wants to pull? Okay. The second item we have is prioritization of board requests for information. Are there any board requests for information? Ms. Michaela.
I don't have an RFI, but before the agenda goes on, where did the new business go that was on the agenda?
We took it off because we figured new business could come under RFI as a request for information, and then we could vote as a board to move forward with it.
Okay, because I had something I wanted to bring up possibly for governance, but it's not anything of, it's not a request for information from the administration, though. So I can do it maybe under comments.
Okay. Okay. So hearing none, is there any public testimony on non-agenda or non-action items at this time? Any public testimony? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to school board administrative comments and communications. Ms. Michaelis.
All right, well, I'll lump these two together. The first one is I wanted to request that governance take a look at board policy 9270, conflict of interest, and kind of looking at, there's a section on appearance of impropriety. And, you know, I've just kind of rough drafted, you know, some language, and I want to gather, you know, other examples from around the country. And it was something that I had a sidebar conversation from our retreat on, you know, basically no member shall vote on an action where there would or could be financial gain by a contributor to the elected official's campaign during the term that they're elected to serve. Something along those lines. And I know that there are models out there that do exist. I found a couple of them. So I just wanted to get this on the calendar for governance, you know, when we're, you know, talking about how
Do we have a second?
I'd like to see that. I don't, even if you do receive, you know, say AA gives you money or something, you could just say it if you're voting on the teacher contract, right? It's fine to say that. So we should always be really transparent about our financial, you know, whatever financial benefits we received when it relates to votes or if it benefits anybody.
And that'll be certainly something we discuss. I don't think it's been a practice of school board that since I've been watching it, but certainly something for discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and then I had one more piece.
Sure.
I had a couple months ago, probably, I think I had requested maybe a discussion among the board on some sort of a cell phone policy. And I was pleased to read that South is doing a pilot program, and I just want to say kudos to them, and I cannot wait to see what the outcome of that happens to be, because they're doing some of that hard work, you know, right up front here in our community, and just wanted to say thank you to them and best of luck.
And actually, I will get an update to the board. When I had taken that request back to the principals, Romig also started one last year, as well as Wendler, and Brendan was going to try to move it with staff's approval. So it's pretty exciting. They're seeing that as well, and it's almost they don't lock them up. It's almost an on your honor type, and it's working. And parents are very supportive. So where we thought the fears would be, you know, that we'd have pushback is actually not there. So we might hopefully be able to report more schools doing that.
So I have actually seen, I believe, walking into Wendler, they now have a posting on the door that says all cell phones will be put away. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Any other, Ms. Mitchell?
So it is that time of year. The June Nelson Scholarship application period is open. It is there are 20 scholarships that are issued by the Alaska Association of School Boards, and that is open through March 16th of 2020. And it's open to seniors in high school, and it is, you know, compared to, 15 scholarships toward post-secondary education. It is not nearly as competitive as some other scholarships, and I would just encourage people to let their students know about this. So you can go to aasb.org to learn more about that and get a link to the application.
Thank you. Ms. Bellamy?
Just a couple of thank yous to our superintendent and staff, Ms. Hunt, for supporting the Martin Luther King Jr. Citywide Commemorative. We had two keynote speakers that were one former student and one current student that were keynote speakers at that event. And it was, I even heard the superintendent said, "Amen," a couple of times. Anyway, I want to thank you for that, because it's important, I think, that we show up and give presence and support for those things. The other thing I wanted to share is that the Betty Davis Summit, the annual summit, will be held on the 29th of February. And this year, we're really working hard to expand that with a youth summit of sorts. And so we'll be keeping you posted on on how that progresses and how the partnerships that we're going to be trying to form to make that youth summit possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Administrative comments? Yes, Ms. Heather.
Yeah, we were watching a movie yesterday for MLK Day, and school segregation came up, and how different schools were not as good as other schools. And getting there to talk to my kids, and I said, in our district, kids don't all do well. We have a lot of kids who are still kind of like the 1960s, where some neighborhoods the kids don't do as well, or some kinds of colors of kids don't do as well, or kids from different backgrounds don't do as well. So I'm really looking forward to being able to tell my kids that we're working on that at our board meetings we're going to start talking about how students are doing and what we're going to do to improve that. So I hope next year I get to tell her a different story when we watch that movie.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from staff? All right, well, do I have a motion to adjourn? We're adjourned.